Good morning. My name is Billy Curtis, and I'm the director of the Gender Equity Resource Center at the University of California, Berkeley. I am honored to deliver these opening remarks for Pride Bahamas 2020. I would like to thank the Pride Committee for inviting me, and in particular, I want to thank Alexis for convincing me to do this, to deliver these remarks. I also want to thank Helen Clinaris for introducing me and Alexis those many years ago. I'm particularly excited and somewhat nervous to be delivering a Pride address to my home country because I've actually never done this before. I've done keynotes, but there's something different about delivering a keynote to your very intersection, being a queer man who was born in the Bahamas, went to school in the Bahamas. I graduated from SAC back in the 80s and member of the Dolphin Swim Club, family still there, come home often enough. And I really miss home. And I'm excited to be connected to the LGBT community in the Bahamas. As the director of the Gender Equity Resource Center at UC Berkeley, I have a distinct passion in creating belonging and a sense of community and justice for those who have minoritized genders or sexualities. And in particular, I am very passionate about equity work, creating equality, and working on policy for my transgender siblings and gender nonconforming friends. When I say siblings, I'm talking about us broadly in the LGBTQ plus community. And so, Pride, I was reflecting on what will I say to those of you today about Pride, and that is Pride in community for me means living my authentic truth, being my authentic self, and engaging in conscious questioning of the world around me, and engaging in community and engaging in conversation and dialogue with others across differences to learn about one another. And so pride gives us a moment to reflect on ourselves within a particular community, but also the intersections. I thought about, I've been to many different pride celebrations. Now, obviously, we're not together. Uh, I'm doing this remotely. I'm not an air traffic controller. This is my headset that I use for work because I'm working from home. And I thought, what was some of the most standout pride celebrations and why for me? I've been to many. I came out to myself as gay when I was a teen, and then later on, I realized that I identify as queer. And I'll say a little bit about that later. So there were three prides that stood out for me. One was when I attended the National March on Washington in 1987. I'd been to a few prides in Boston and a smaller town in Massachusetts, but I'd never been to a pride where there were a million lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans people. Now, this is 1987, so I'm going to be honest with the language then. It was lesbian, gay, bisexual. We didn't use the word transgenders often, and queer was definitely not used in 1987. Um, but because there were so many people, I looked around and thought, oh, wow, I mean, I know that this is a large community, but there was this moment of not being alone, but more importantly, this sense of being part of something much larger. I thought that, well, that's a national march. I'll never experience something like that again unless it's a national march. But I experienced it again when I attended my first San Francisco Pride in 1991. Again, almost a million people. It's one of the largest pride celebrations in the world. And I got the same sense of pride and sense of community and sense of belonging that I continue to carry with me. The third, but most important one, which allows me to reflect back on myself as a Bahamian is when I attended gay games in Amsterdam. I went to the opening ceremonies because I was going to have a good time, etc. I didn't expect to have this magical moment that happened. In my head, of course, I knew that gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people are everywhere in the world. But there was this march of countries and cities, and there were people from parts of the world where I didn't expect them to be marching so boldly and openly because the information that I had at the time was that those countries were dangerous to live in as gay. Now, that could be that they were living there or not, but what was important for me to see was that all of us, no matter where we live, no matter where we're from, find a way to engage our pride and to live our authentic selves. And so there I was witnessing an international event that was filled with folks like me with similar hopes and dreams and the desire to be able to love who we are in the open, love our partners in the open, marry them for some of us, and basically be left alone to be similar to how others are allowed to marry and no one questions that, or this is my husband, this is my wife, here are my kids, etc. And so that moment of we all have this sense of wanting to live a dignified human life where we are not harassed simply because of who we are, or worse, beaten up or killed. And so the Amsterdam event solidified for me something I didn't know I needed solidified, was that the international community is where a lot of my work also needed to be. So Pride for me is a really important time. It's an important celebration for all of us to pause and reflect on who we are as gays, lesbians, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, and others. I also want to reflect on the Bahamas and words that I always carry with me. Um, Forward, upward, onward, together. Always paid attention to that motto, and together always sticks out for me. That in order for us as a people to be successful, whether we're talking about Bahamians or you talk about all humans, we need to work together. We need to learn from one another and hear one another's stories and respect those stories and move forward, even when we disagree, that we allow people their life and their liberty. I also, I deliberately did put the flag behind me. I actually have one hanging in my office. And what stands out is obviously for me is the black triangle. I was born before independence, so I was well aware. I remember when on that week of independence in 1973, asking my dad, I'm like, get me a flag. I want to get a flag. And he woke me up on Independence Day actually and handed me a flag. And I learned everything that I could about the flag. And that equilateral triangle progressing forward is what stands out for me. I think the flag is quite a smart flag, that it represents the people pressing forward together. The other thing that stands out for me as a Bahamian is the words written by my uncle Timmy, Timothy Gibson, in the National Anthem. And in the part where it says, pledge to excel through love and unity, pressing onward, march together to a common loftier goal. This part here, so this word together keeps showing up. And what we're asking for as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender folks and our allies is full participation in society in an open and civil way, similar to all others who get married, they have their kids, or go to work, can get a job, and Folks know about them based on who they are, their full selves. So full participation, that's what we're asking for. Love and together, that we must do this through love and together. Full participation for all Bahamians in society. But this doesn't seem to happen because there are a few things at play, and I want to focus on a couple. And that is homophobia and transphobia, or homo hatred and trans hatred, are weapons of sexism. That the oppression, I'm just simplifying this, oversimplified look at the oppression of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people. This is about the marginalization and hatred globally of women. Now, let's think about that for just 1 second. Why do I bring up women in this? Aren't you talking about sexuality? I mean, gender is transgender, but over here is sexuality. And that is when you think of how the words we use against gay folks, it is usually language that is demeaning to the feminine. And so when someone acts feminine, they become a batty boy, they become a sissy, they become these other things, even if that's not their orientation. So it's usually leveraged early on. The first times you hear it, usually when you're a kid, is usually at a boy, and that he's acting like a girl. He's acting like the lesser. And then when girls act outside of their gender norms and are more tomboyish or butch, not feminine enough, they're called out by their name as well, because they're not being who society expects them to be as a woman. So we render gender roles and behaviors as somehow what the person actually is and who they are and who they will be and whether they can contribute or not. So these behaviors, this anti-fem, is a form of misogyny that is continually presenting itself in our oppression. Its most violent forms are against transgender women in particular, and to a degree, trans men as well. So the singular focus on gender roles as a way of determining whether someone should be fully participating or they should act like a man or act like a woman holds us all back. This isn't just holding back gays and lesbians and bisexuals, it's holding back everyone, and in particular, women. So sometimes when I hear some women who are homophobic, I question them and say, without even thinking of this through a feminist lens, you don't need to be a feminist. You're a church-going woman, but you believe that you have the right to speak up and that you should have equal voice. And in that regard, when you engage in homophobia, you actually work against your own desires for equal participation as well. So that's the oversimplified version just based on gender roles. The other issue that I've always found curious is the focus on sex. Asking people about their sex and how they have it, or do you do that? This focus on the sex act as if that's the only thing. And that's not to desexualize gays and lesbians or heterosexuals. I mean, sexuality and a good sex life and sex culture is an important, healthy thing. But an overfocus in terms of only seeing people through a sexual lens is a form of marginalization that is not un, unfamiliar to those of us who have studied race theory and racism. And those of you who understand that or know that the over sexualization of the Black body was a way that slave masters kept us in place. So when we start talking about sex and only seeing someone through a sex lens, we need to complicate the conversation. Why is that such a focus? Why is that the only focus? Again, not to desexualize those of us who have a healthy sex life, but it contributes to us not being in full participation, but it also re it reconnects with another sorry it reconnects us to another part of our history, particularly those of us who are black and descendants of slaves. The other thing it unfortunately contributes to is rape culture, an over focus on sex, as a means to put down or engage or make fun of gays and lesbians is connected right back to the very ills that we face as a society around rape and sexual assault when we over focus on people's bodies in that way. So those were the things I wanted to bring to you today. That pride, take pride in who you are, focus on community, and for those who are still trying to learn about us, to understand that homophobia and transphobia, your disgust or don't want to deal with or anger toward gays and lesbians existing, is also contributing to issues of racism and sexism globally, but particularly sexism and women broadly. So, what is the call for? That we all take pride in who we are as humans and that we want to work together. And that is where we come back to our motto, our flag, and our national anthem. That we want to progress together, that we need diverse voices in the room in order to have diverse ideas. We'll have our disagreements, but together we can solve problems and move forward, not just as a nation in the Bahamas, but as a human species. We are faced with some challenging things that are in front of us, such as climate change in particular. And not to say, oh, you need to involve gays and lesbians. It's we need to involve everyone, and we need to do that without bias and without prejudice. So to you, I say, happy Pride and march on, Bahama land. Good day.